Hey guys, today I want to share something a little special with you. A marker illustration I made, inspired by one of my favorite Hong Kong dramas, Barrack O'Karma. If you've seen the show, you probably remember the character Coco, that playful, mysterious, charming woman who just lights up the screen. The piece I'm showing today is based on one of her most unforgettable moments. The scene where she and Lao Shuk Fai dance together on the streets of Macau. Right after leaving the casino, they had just won some money, and there's this pure, joyful energy between them. You can see it in their smiles, in the way they move, like no one's watching. It feels like, just for that moment, life finally gave them a break. No worries, no pain, just joy and freedom. For me, that was Coco, at her happiest. Radiant, alive, and completely herself. And that's exactly the feeling I wanted to capture in this drawing. Inspiration and character design. When I started planning the piece, I knew I wanted to capture that dancing outfit. Coco wears a red mini dress that instantly reminded me of Audrey Hepburn's iconic look in Breakfast at Tiffany's. The black dress, the pearl necklace, the elegant updo. It felt like a modern, more passionate echo of that image. Coco's red version feels more alive. It's not just elegant, it's bold and emotional. So I tried to keep that mix of grace and freedom in the drawing, a kind of refined chaos, if that makes sense. To make the composition more interesting, I added a few little story elements. Flying playing cards, poker chips in her hand. And of course, the black cat that appears throughout the series. That cat is almost symbolic in the show, like a silent witness to everything that happens, or maybe a soul that keeps wandering between lives. So I just had to include it in the artwork. It makes the scene feel more complete and a bit magical. Line work and setup. I started the line work on my iPad, then printed it out on Arch's fine-grain watercolor paper. That's a method I love. It saves so much time. And if something goes wrong, I can just print it again. No stress, no wasted paper. The video mainly shows the coloring process with Copic markers. Some parts didn't record properly, so what you'll see is mostly the skin tones, the dress, and the cat. Unfortunately, the background wasn't captured, but it still gives a good look at the main coloring process. Coloring process when it comes to coloring. My main goal was to keep the tones soft and breathable. For the skin, I left the highlight areas blank. The white of the paper naturally becomes the glow. Same for the hair. I didn't color the highlights, just shaded the darker parts to keep that natural light feeling. The gloves are treated similarly. Only the shadow areas are filled, so the lighting looks clean and elegant. Now for the red dress, it as the core of the whole image. If I filled it completely with red, it would have looked flat and heavy. So I blended in some gray at the bottom and even a touch of light purple to balance the tone. It gives the red more dimension and mood. I didn't fill the edges completely either. I let the pink tones softly transition out and used a hint of yellow along the light edges to mimic the reflection of warm light. Sometimes I use the Copic colorless blender, the zero marker, to soften those boundaries, especially around folds and fabric transitions. For the folds themselves, I deepen them with a darker red to bring out texture and depth. The cat, the toughest part. Honestly, the hardest part was the cat. Working with black markers can be tricky. It's so easy to overdo it and lose all sense of light. I think I went a bit too dark here, and it ended up looking too flat for my liking. If I could redo it, I'd start with a neutral gray like Copic B5, then slowly layer darker shades toward the head, keeping the tail and legs much lighter. That kind of gradient would give the body more rhythm and life. I also want the light on the cat to connect naturally with Coco's lighting. But since I went too dark, that relationship kind of disappeared. So yeah, that's something I'd love to improve next time. Small details for the metallic accessory around her waist. I used masking fluid to keep the highlights white, so I could freely paint the dress without worrying about overlap. Her pearl necklace was shaded with a very light blue, just enough to give that cool, reflective shimmer. The handbag was painted in light gray, with hints of blue and yellow, to show a bit of ambient light bouncing off from the surroundings. But looking back, I probably would have left the whole bag white. It would have created stronger contrast and more focus on Coco herself. Reflections and what I learned. Overall, I still really like how this piece turned out. It carries the emotion of that story, and it also captures a bit of how I was feeling when I painted it. That excitement of bringing a moment you love into your own world. Of course, there are things I do differently. Like I said, the missing footage and the cat's tone. But honestly, that's part of the fun of creating. You finish something, look back, and start to see what you do better next time. That's growth. That's the journey. I'm planning to upload a real-time version of this process later, especially showing the skin and dress rendering. So if you're into Copic markers, I hope that'll give you some inspiration or ideas. And one last little Easter egg. If you look closely at the bottom of her handbag, you'll see the name Coco written there. It's my tiny tribute to her, a quiet nod to a character I really connected with. So yeah, that's the story behind this piece. Thanks for watching and hanging out with me. I hope you enjoyed this process and maybe found a spark of inspiration too. See you in the next video. Bye.